Hello, everyone, and welcome on into today's lecture video. So, in this video for survey, we're going to be going over the basic chemistry of anatomy. So, you're like, why do I need to learn chemistry in an anatomy and physiology course? Well, to understand the physiology of how everything works in the body, we have to understand chemistry. To understand how digestion works and metabolism works, we have to go into the structures of the macromolecules of life, proteins, lipids, carbohydrates, and things like that, and understand how we can absorb them, build them, and so forth in the body, how we make energy and all that. So, to understand chemistry, you understand anatomy. So, in this first video here, first we're going to go over the basics and, the basic unit is the atom. And then from the atom, we form all the different elements, which then come together to form molecules and compounds. And we're going to go over the basic units of matter. So matter can exist as a solid, liquid, or gas. Then we're going to look at some of the specific structures here that pertain more to it that we'll talk about throughout anatomy and physiology, like hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, chlorine, sodium, and potassium. And then we're going to talk about how bonds form. How do we form these together to start forming these macromolecules? They can form via covalent or ionic bonds. We're also going to talk about hydrogen bonds, polar and nonpolar covalent bonds in this video. So a lot to get through. And in the next video, we're going to be going into the 4 classes of macromolecules of life. So first, just a little overview of what we find in the human body. Of course, lots of oxygen, and this is percentage by mass. So 65% oxygen by mass. So very, very important. Then we have carbon here at 18.5%. All the macromolecules, organic chemistry is referring to chemistry that contains carbon. So carbon, very, very essential. And so carbon can form 4 bonds. We'll talk about how that is later today. Hydrogen, then 9.5%. So even though there's a lot of hydrogen, so we draw, a molecule of water right here, H2O, there's 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. So you're like, why is hydrogen only 9.5%? Well, hydrogen weighs 1 atomic mass unit and oxygen weighs 16. So a big difference there in the weight of each. Nitrogen, 3.2. Nitrogen becomes important in proteins and your DNA, like nucleic acids. Calcium here, even though it's a small percent, very important for your bones, for heartbeat, your neurons working properly. Phosphorus, also important in the structure of your DNA, RNA, because there's a sugar phosphate backbone going down it. Potassium, very important for muscle contractions, nervous system working, heart rate, things like that. Sulfur is an important part of strengthening your amino acids via something called disulfide bonds. Sodium, just like potassium, important in the nervous system. So these are electrolytes, so like potassium, sodium, chloride ions, and magnesium here. These are important electrolytes in the body. And calcium is an ion. So those can form ions, and we'll talk about what ions are later. Chlorine also important in those processes. And then we have magnesium here, which is also an important cofactor in a lot of reactions. And of course, there's a whole bunch of trace elements. So missing any of these, you're not going to be having a good time. Iodine is essential in your thyroid. Iron is essential for transporting oxygen in the blood. So it's just a little idea of the importance of some of these other ones we do find in the body, but are essential for life. So here's our little periodic table of elements. So of course, hydrogen here starts out first, and then helium up here in the first row. And the periodic table gets its shape because it tells you exactly the properties of that element. So these are all of the elements here, and you can draw the structure of their atoms based upon where they are on the periodic table. So helium here, if we look at what's in an atom, there are protons, there are neutrons, and there are electrons. Protons carry a positive charge, neutrons are a neutral charge, and then electrons carry a negative charge. So an element at the atomic level is neutral, meaning it has no charge. So the number of protons will balance with the number of electrons, and that's what's essential in this periodic table right here. Now I know we might not have a background in chemistry, so we're not going to go into crazy detail here. So I'm just giving a general overview. Just note that there is a lot more information about chemistry that we're skipping over today, and I'm aware of that. Again, this is a survey course, so I'm giving you enough information to understand anatomy and physiology. But understanding the charge that an atom makes is important for forming something called an ion. And having the number of electrons in these orbital shells is important in understanding what a covalent bond is and how they form. So that's what we're going to be going into today, are these different structures and how they come together. So here is what I was talking about with electron shells. As we go across the periodic table, so going this direction, you're increasing the number of electrons. I write E negative. As you go down the periodic table, you're increasing the number of electron shells. So if I was drawing a chlorine atom right here, it would have 1, 2, 3 electron shells, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 electrons in the outer shell. So we know exactly what that atomic picture is for a chlorine atom. So oxygen, 2 shells with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 electrons in that outer shell. So here, hydrogen has a single electron in that outer shell. The inside has 1 proton, and the number of neutrons can vary, but so it can be like 1 or 2. Now, if the number of protons change, the atom changes. So if we look at the periodic table here, what we have, let me switch back to our red, oh, that's pink, our red color, we have the atomic number right here. So like carbon has the atomic number of 6. That tells you there are 6 protons. So plus 6. Here, I know this might be hard to read for you, but that's 12. That says 12.0107. That's the atomic mass, or AMU, atomic mass units. So that is the number of protons plus the number of neutrons. And usually they're roughly equal. So 6 plus 6 is roughly 12. But since the number of neutrons can change, that is an average number. Electrons, they're so small they're not considered in the atomic mass. They're considered in the charge and what kind of bonds it forms. So just a little heads up there. When you change the number of neutrons in an element, it becomes a different isotopes. And they can decay, and we can use that in imaging in anatomy and physiology, because they can give off energy. We can collect that energy, and we can see things inside the body. So different scans and things like that. So helium is over here. 2 protons for 1 shell, and then 2 electrons. So that's what we see down here. We see 2 electrons in that outer shell. For helium, carbon, like I said, has 6. The first shell holds 2. The second shell holds 8 electrons. So 2 electrons in the first shell, 8 electrons in the outer shell. So carbon has 4 single electrons. The outer shells, we say, well, they want 8 to be happy. That's very simple terms in putting it. So like neon here is completely stable because it has 2 in the first shell and then 8 electrons in the outer shell. These are known as the noble gases, and they don't really bond with anything else. They can exist in that state. Carbon wants to form bonds to somehow get 8 electrons in that outer shell. And so carbon forms what are called covalent bonds. So it can form up to 4 covalent bonds and share pairs of electrons with another atom, so it feels like it has 8 electrons in that outer shell. So then we can start forming molecules. A molecule is 2 or more atoms joined together by a bond. So like a molecule of oxygen, they're the same. You could have a molecule of CO2. So these are gases. You could have a molecule of glucose. So they can be different. So molecules kind of considers everything, whereas a compound is where they're always different. So you could say a compound of glucose, C6H12O6, is glucose, or a carbohydrate. So I say compound of glucose, but you could also say molecule of glucose as well here. But you can't say a compound of oxygen because they are the same. Here, different elements. Here, all the same. So you can say a molecule of oxygen or a molecule of nitrogen, and that means it's nitrogen gas, oxygen gas, and so forth. So that's just the difference between an element, a molecule, and a compound. Now, we need to form bonds. First type of bond we're going to talk about are these ionic bonds. Ionic bonds, the key word here is a transfer of electrons. So keyword is transfer. And they form ions, hence an ionic bond. Sodium, if we look at where it is on the periodic table, it's in column 1. So it's right here. 3 electron shells, 1 electron in that outer shell. That makes it very unstable. So sodium has a single electron in that outer shell right here. It does not like that. You put raw sodium in water, it explodes. So chlorine has 7 electrons in that outer shell and 1 electron here. Chlorine wants 1 more. So what happens here is that the electron from sodium is given and transferred to chlorine. Then chlorine has 8 electrons, and this one has none, but then it has 8 electrons in the next shell down. So it's stable then. However, now we moved a negative charge over to a different atom. So now the charge is going to change. And if we remove a negative charge, so sodium, if we look, has 11 protons, according to its atomic number. Now it has 10 electrons because it got rid of 1 electron. So if you have plus 10 protons and minus, 11 protons, sorry, and minus 10 electrons, now you have a charge of plus 1. So you see sodium written as Na plus. And for chlorine, now it got a negative electron and it becomes Cl minus. So it was minus 1 or plus 1. If you see like calcium 2 plus, that means it lost 2 electrons in that transfer. So that's what we mean by charge. And now when these things come together, opposite charges attract. And when they're not in water, they can form these crystal-like structures. So you have negatively charged chlorines attracted to positive sodium. So salt forms a crystal. And so these ions can form crystals. But when they're in our body, they dissolve in water because water pulls these charges apart and is attracted to them. That's how things dissolve. So it's very important that solubility is a very important aspect here. So that's an ionic bond. Next up are covalent bonds. Covalent bonds, the key word is sharing. So sharing electrons. We're not transferring, we're sharing them between atoms. There are 2 types here. There are nonpolar and polar. And what that is talking about is the difference between sharing those electrons. Sometimes it's an unequal sharing, and that creates polarity or sidedness. So first, these nonpolar ones are an equal sharing of electrons. So if we have an equal sharing of electrons here, it means there's an equal pull. So, hydrogen gas is H2. There's an equal pull of electrons throughout. So if you were to draw the electron density cloud here, you would see no sides to it. And then, so here, an oxygen forms a double bond. A double bond is a sharing of 2 pairs of electrons. So we draw it like that, where each one of these lines represents a pair of shared electrons for a double bond. So double bonds are stronger. If we had nitrogen gas, nitrogen is a triple bond, so a very, very strong bond. And so within that bond, there are 6 electrons that are being shared and then 2 additional electrons out here. So each nitrogen thinks it has 8 electrons, but these are all nonpolar. There's no unequal charge distribution throughout. It's an even charge distribution. Same thing here with larger molecules like CO2. There's an equal charge distribution throughout this molecule, so there's no part that feels more negative. Remember, these electrons carry a negative charge than the other. But so this is CO2, so 1 carbon, and each of these carbons has 2, this carbon has 2 double bonds, and that's 4 on each side, so 8 electrons. That carbon still thinks it has 8 electrons in the outer shell. Same with each oxygen. It forms a molecule of CO2. So these are nonpolar, and that's important. They can easily move through membranes and things like that and diffuse around. Next up, we have the polar covalent bonds, which then we'll talk about hydrogen bonds as well. Polar means there's an unequal charge distribution, which is perfectly fine, and it creates sidedness or polarity. So here is water. So, H2O. And for water, hydrogens, so there's two single covalent bonds right here. And so that's, a pair of shared electrons. And then there are two more pairs of electrons found on oxygen that don't form any more bonds. So what happens is you have a higher amount of electrons over here. So electrons are pulled more towards that oxygen. Oxygen is kind of like a big bully, having more electrons around it compared to the hydrogens. So what happens is we get this partial negative charge on oxygen. So partial is this little delta symbol right here. And then we get a partial positive charge on the hydrogens. And that creates charge, and opposite charges attract. So here you see the delta negative, delta positive down here. And that means water is polar, and any other structure that has this polarity or unequal charge distribution is polar. So these atoms up here at this corner of the periodic table have a higher electronegativity. So they are, if you see those, typically those are going to be something that's more polar, just as an aside. And so polar, like dissolves like. Polar things dissolve other polar things. And that's where we can form hydrogen bonds with water. So what happens with a water molecule here in a hydrogen bond is that you have that partial negative and partial positive here on the oxygens and the hydrogens. Well, if you had another water molecule right here with a partial positive, these charges are attracted. So that's a partial negative and a partial positive, and it forms something called a hydrogen bond. And water can stick to itself and stick to its surroundings and help dissolve things because of these hydrogen bonds. Without water being a polar molecule, life would not exist as we know it. So that's an essential part of life with a polarity. It seems like a weird thing, but none of your proteins would dissolve, your cell membranes wouldn't maintain their structure, and it just wouldn't work. Life would not work as we know it. Also, can store a lot more heat and prevent the extreme release of heat. So it helps maintain a homeostasis of our body temperature as well. All right, so this video here was our little crash course chemistry of anatomy. In the next video, we're going to continue this and now talk about the macromolecules of life and specifically carbon and how it bonds to other things for organic material. So if you have any questions, please reach out and let me know. That's all I have today, and see you all next time. Bye-bye.